Hello, welcome to the Culture Quarter. I'm Siobhan Heanue. Coming up, from Russia with Love, the dance costumes that shocked the world. But first, they're the leading ladies of Australia's culinary culture. Maggie Beer and Margaret Fulton have introduced this country to a more multicultural menu, and they say that food, much like fashion, never stops changing. They took Kate Davey on a history tour through Australia's remarkable food revolution.
Australia's eating habits are in a period of rapid transition.
I guess in the last 30 years we've seen the most exciting journey we might ever see in Australia in food.
We're forging a culinary identity, all our own.
We've come of age, so to speak, and we've lost our culinary cringe in that time.
In the 19th century and early 20th century, Australia had a bit of a reputation for plain cookery.
But not anymore. Transport, our ethnic origins and industry have influenced this change.
The influences are interesting when you think about how accessible travel has become in the last 30 years, last 20 years, 10 years today. You know, it's been an escalation, hasn't it? And as people travel, they broaden their horizons. They see and experience other cultures. They eat in great restaurants sometimes. The food interested do. But it's about, with that comes knowledge. And interest and therefore, you know, people want to grab a little bit of what they've experienced that was so fantastic for them.
The most important ingredients in cooking is love. And this new complete book of cookery was written with love.
In her magazine columns and later her cookbooks, Margaret Fulton showed the nation how to cook in new and exciting ways.
I was going overseas 2 or 3 months a year and meeting the good cooks of all over the world, you know, Denmark, Sweden, Mexico, Buenos Aires, you know, you name it. Then I also was bringing back recipes which people had read about and people had also tasted when they started to travel overseas. And so when I started producing these recipes in these what had been nice little homely magazines, the women loved it because the meat and 3 vegetables that Australians were known for, there's nothing wrong with that. It's lovely. A properly grilled lamb chop and nicely cooked vegetables is lovely. But women got bored doing the same thing every day of the week. So they leapt on my recipes with open arms.
But not everyone was as open to change.
Sometimes the husbands didn't like when I had a recipe for a loin of pork with prunes in it, which I'd learned to make in Denmark. Some husbands said, well, darling, I know you're very busy, but I really do like my dessert on a separate plate. But the women sort of good-naturedly just went on, and when they made pasta and spaghetti, the same thing the men would say, that was very nice, dear, but what's for dinner? But it is interesting that then the men discovered that the kitchen was a good place to be, and they started cooking.
And it seems they've never looked back. Australians are becoming more adventurous, blending ingredients from other cultures.
The strength of our food culture has come about through our multicultural society, and in each state of Australia, each microclimate also has their micro immigration when you think about it, because the influences of our food from the culture around us and the climate. And so when you can work with the climate and have those cultural influences, you know, you have something very special and very different from one state to another.
I don't think anything necessarily sticks out as a distinctive Australian cuisine, except for the way that we bring all of those things together.
But perhaps we have too much choice. With better access to food, including easy pre-packaged food, the easier it is to lose core kitchen know-how.
There's been another journey happening which has been a negative, and that's where there are generations where there's been such a change in circumstance where both partners work that there hasn't been a handing down from one generation to another of not just food traditions, but just how to look after yourself, how to cook. And so that has led to a huge percentage of people relying on processed foods and the ubiquitous fast food, and missing out on those really important links.
So while you had Margaret Fulton in 1968 suggesting that people should use seasonal produce, unless you have a garden, you may not actually know what is in season, because you go to a supermarket, and most things are there.
And the country's top cooks say we might be missing out on one of our best food opportunities, the food culture right on our doorstep.
There would be some that would feel we have not taken advantage of our Indigenous food culture, which is true. There are others that would feel that we've hit the ground running and we're racing over the hill, and all of that's true. I know visiting chefs that come to Australia are so often astounded at our produce, which doesn't mean there isn't wonderful produce elsewhere, like, you know, there is, but they are often astounded. And that's, I'm always pleased and proud to hear that. We are a very food-interested society now. That is this percentage of us that are very food-interested, but there is another percentage that don't care at all. The food is the centre, the kitchen, the table, the sharing, the caring, the love, the laughter, the debates, all of those things. If we can all have them, we live a better life.
In the early 20th century, the dance company Ballet Russe shocked audiences with its extravagant style. So much so that at one Paris premiere, the audience stormed the stage. When the company toured Australia in the 1930s, it helped to awaken this nation from a deep cultural slumber. Now, some of the costumes that inspired and surprised local artists are on display at the National Gallery.
In the world of costume design, these wearable works of art are renowned. They're the groundbreaking vision of Russian Sergei Diaghilev, who founded Ballet Russe in 1911.
The powerful mix that he was able to pull together was putting the choreographers and the dancers with musicians, composers and designers of the avant-garde end of modern art and contemporary music.
Ballet Russe collaborated with artists such as Matisse, who brought a painter's eye to the stage.
Costumes that, in a way, extended the dancer's body, that allowed choreography to be much more expressive and much less traditional and formal.
These cosmic-themed costumes from 1928 feature phosphorescent paint. Others reflect the tumultuous times and Bolshevik ideals of the Industrial Revolution. And there's plenty of bling with sumptuous materials, including 24-karat gold metallic thread and silk velvet.
It's actually the variety of the costume that I just love, the Eastern influence.
There's quite a few garments I wouldn't mind taking home. They're really quite modern. They're quite nice. They're very beautiful colours, and the colours, just gorgeous.
But the designs arrived before the advent of air conditioning, dry cleaning, lycra and colour-fast dyes. They were seldom washed and featured built-in sweat pads.
There is evidence that the dancers themselves actually threatened to go on strike because they thought the costumes were unwearable, undanceable.
The National Gallery began the collection in the 1970s. 50 of the 150 pieces have never been exhibited before. Their painstaking restoration represents the largest textile conservation project ever undertaken in Australia. It's a collection that's bound to wow visitors and influence a new generation of designers. Ballet Russe, The Art of Costume, continues until March.
It's one of Canberra's lesser-known cultural icons. The national carillon is a giant outdoor musical instrument, and it's been chiming away on the shores of Lake Burley-Griffin for more than 30 years. Most people who've passed through Canberra have heard it being played, but not many would know who's behind the bells. Ben Lisson met the mystery man.
George Howe's music has resonated across Lake Burley-Griffin for 3 decades, providing a soundtrack for an expanding city.
You can play any sort of music on here, and things that people you hope would like as they go past, because you can't see your audience.
He may not have been able to see them, but today they were there in force, listening to him for the last time.
He's such a wonderful musician, and he knows so much about the carillon, so much about music.
George played Ode to Joy, Song of Joy for our wedding here.
Was George definitely? Or?
Yeah, we walked across the, instead of down the aisle, across the bridge and
just
married
like 31 years ago.
He's played an integral role in the history of the National Carillon, a gift from the British government built in 1970.
We saw this wonderful instrument being built and thought very little of it, perhaps.
A few years later, Mr. Howe, an experienced organist, responded to a newspaper ad calling for a Carillonist.
I apparently was the only applicant, and so I thought, well, I'll be here for 3 months, 6 months, they'll find someone who can really play this instrument.
33 years on, and only now is he calling curtains. He's seen the carillon change dramatically with new bells, elevators and even air conditioning.
We now have what's a world-class instrument. Sound-wise, position-wise, sound going across water, couldn't be better.
Nor could Mr. Howe, who will leave behind a distinct legacy.
A room upstairs is named after him, the George Howe room.
And on his final bash of the bells, Mr. Howe was a showman to the end.
How's that?
And that's all for this episode. I'm Siobhan Hinu, and I'll catch you next time on The Culture Quarter.